Hey guys, how's everyone doing? Hope everybody's still doing well. So we talked last time in the other video about some of the modifications to the AP exam this year. So what we want to do is give you some practice problems to help you get used to the new format. So if you recall, there's going to be no graphing on this year's exam. So anytime a question would have mentioned something like show, that would of course been an indication that you would graph. Now you're just going to have to either do that in your head, or you can still do it on scrap paper, but you don't have to actually submit that graph for your question. So without further ado, I want to get into the first practice problem that we posted for you guys to work on. It's titled Practice Modified FRQ number 1. And it deals with two countries, country X and country Y, and then it asks you to calculate who has the comparative advantage in consumer goods. So you first have to recall how we calculate comparative advantage, and you may remember that it is determined by who has the lower per unit opportunity cost. So again, although you're not required to graph, in this case it certainly would be helpful to draw a diagram to help you make the calculation. So having said that, I set up the diagram based on the question, and you'll see here that you have the producers on your vertical axis and you have the products across the top on the horizontal, country X, country Y, consumer goods, capital goods. And again, if you want to calculate the per unit opportunity cost, you have to use the methods that we discussed, either output other goes over or input other goes under. So in this case, if you look at the question carefully, this would be input data. So I know a lot of you still struggle with this. How do I determine input, output? At the end of the day, it doesn't actually make a difference because the ratios are the same. But nevertheless, in this case, you look at where is the variation in the numbers. In other words, what are the different numbers? In this case, the 1 and the 2 and the 4, what do those numbers actually represent? And in this case, they represent the number of hours needed to produce 1 unit of each. In other words, what varies here is the input, the number of hours, as opposed to the output, the unit of consumer goods or the unit of capital goods. So again, in this case, therefore, we would use the input other goes under process. And so since we're solving for consumer goods, we would use the other category would be the capital goods, and the number would come under, right? So 2 would come under 1, 1 over 2 reduces to 0.5, and then the 4 would come under the 2, which again, if you reduce, you get your least common denominator, that's also 0.5. So in this instance, because they both have a per unit opportunity cost of 0.5, you would say that neither producer, neither country X nor country Y, has the comparative advantage. So that's the answer to the first question, question A. Neither producer, and again, when it says explain, the 3 words you always have to mention are lower opportunity cost. But again, because lower opportunity cost doesn't exist here, neither producer has the lower opportunity cost. All right, so the next part of the question then talks about the unemployment and the labor market in country X. And they give you the table, and the table gives us the number of people employed, which would be 180,000 in this case, the number frictionally unemployed, the number structurally unemployed, and the number cyclically unemployed, and then the last number, 100,000, are not in the labor force. So the first thing to remember when asked to calculate the unemployment rate is, what is the formula for that, right? So you have to figure out what is the number unemployed, doesn't matter what type of unemployment it is, structural, frictional, fructural, cyclical, doesn't matter, over the number in the labor force. So if you were to add up the number who are unemployed here, it's 10,000 who are frictionally unemployed, 5,000 who are structurally unemployed, and 5,000 who are cyclically unemployed. So 10 plus 5 plus 5 gives you 20,000. And what is the number in the labor force? So remember, the labor force includes those who are employed, currently working, that's 180,000 in this particular question, plus the number who are officially unemployed, those 20,000, right? So it's 180,000 plus 20,000 gives you 200,000. So it's the 20,000 unemployed divided by 200,000 who are in the labor force, and that gives you 20 over 200 reduces to 1 over 10 or 0.1, but because it has to be converted into a percentage, you have to multiply by 100. So it's 0.1 times 100, you move your decimal point over 2 times, that gives you 10%. So the unemployment rate here, the answer to question B is 10%. Okay. The next part of the question refers to the so-called labor force participation rate. So this is where that last number, 100,000 who are in the population, although not in the labor force, becomes relevant. So the labor force participation rate is determined by taking the number of people in the labor force, again that's 200,000 from part B, and you divide that by the total population, which would be 300,000. So it's 200,000 divided by 300,000, 2/3. Again, if we want to convert that to a percentage, it would be 0.6666 times 100, which would give us 66.666666, or just 66.7% rounded. The last part of the question deals with the production possibilities curve for country X. So this is a pretty straightforward question. It simply says, if you were to designate a point representing the current level of unemployment in country X, where would it be with respect to the production possibilities curve? And remember, if you're wasting resources, if you're underutilizing resources, that would be at a point inside the curve. If you were at full employment, you would be on the curve, and you may recall that beyond the curve means that that is unattainable with the current resources. So that's the modified question. Again, it'll be something like this. We'll have 3 in total on the AP exam. So hopefully you guys solved those all correctly. If you did, give yourself 100, put it on the refrigerator, show your parents how well you're doing in school. All right, I'll come back with the next video on the next question shortly. Take care, guys.